Hi guys, and welcome to another episode of Kabir Considers. In this video, we're going to react to why Americans love big cars. Now, one thing, I saw, we went to New York, LA, Vegas, San Francisco, Yosemite, and Sequoia National Park. And no matter where we went, we saw tons of pickup trucks, just everywhere. Dodge Rams, what were the other ones? F-150, even just like a big Escalade. Americans love big cars. It was just such a different, very different to what I'm used to. I think it's because our roads here are so much smaller that it's just impractical to have a pickup truck unless you're maybe a farmer, or maybe you live kind of away from big cities where the roads are just so much tighter, because just getting around the corners and stuff would be a nightmare. You'd have to slow down to 5 miles an hour. Hopefully the person behind you is patient and they don't start blasting their horn at you. But yeah, why? Is it just are there financial incentives to buying big cars? Do you get maybe tax credits or something like that? What is the appeal? Or is it just seen in America that the bigger something is, the better it is?
In this low-lying car I drive in, I've been noticing something lately. When I'm sitting in traffic, I either can't see past the cars in front of me, or the cars around me are towering over me. And it turns out there's a big reason for that. The production of passenger cars like sedans and wagons for sale in the U.S. has been in free fall since 1975. And in their place has been the steady growth in the production of SUVs. Last year, SUVs and trucks made up 80% of all new car sales.
Wow.
Compare that to 52% in 2011. The fact that Americans like big cars probably won't shock anyone. They are everywhere, even in my parking-scarce neighborhood in Brooklyn. But the reasons behind this transformation are more than just cultural. It all goes back to a 50-year-old policy that would kick off a huge shift in the way U.S. cars are designed.
Interesting.
So I'm driving from my home in Brooklyn, New York to a beach in Rhode Island.
I guess, yeah, the bigger your car, if it's involved in a crash, the more safe it is for the passenger inside, perhaps.
Summer vacation. And along the way, I'm going to piece together why big cars took over America. New York was the 45th state to officially succumb to the takeover of SUVs and trucks in 2014, according to this Washington Post analysis. Alaska was the first state to go big car dominant in 1988. So I'm wondering if you have any advice for things I should look out for while I'm on the road.
Anywhere that you stop, count the number of SUVs versus the number of passenger cars.
Okay, we're in the Costco parking lot, filled with SUVs. 1, 2, 3,
More storage
4,
as well, I guess.
5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 SUVs in a row. I think that is my new record. So once you learn about how much big cars dominate the road, it's like you can't unsee it. People have lots of reasons for choosing a big car, and certainly the infrastructure in the U.S. supports that choice. Unlike a lot of other countries, our built environment revolves around cars. We have wide roads and wide, plentiful parking spaces, and homes with plenty of parking. I arrived in Connecticut, a state that succumbed to light truck dominance in 2016, and pulled into a rest stop where I interviewed Thomas Bochenek, who was on a cross-country road trip with his wife.
It's very comfortable. Okay, to drive. Well, I think the bigger the car, the more you have a...
And I guess, yeah, the higher the ride, the less you feel the bumps as well, don't you? So, yeah, it's probably more comfortable.
Feeling of security. The smaller the car, the more likely I think about getting into an accident and being hurt. It has no trouble pulling this almost 7,000-pound trailer.
In other countries, one deterrent for big cars is that they cost so much to fill up with gas.
Yeah.
But due to low taxes on gas in the U.S., fuel is extremely cheap compared to other countries.
Way cheaper.
But there's another overlooked bias towards big cars related to why SUVs exist in the first place. In the 1970s, there was a shortage of foreign oil in the U.S.
1973 dramatized U.S. dependence on foreign oil.
So the US government set rules for automakers to start making cars more fuel efficient to lessen our dependence on the whims of the global oil market. By 1985, new cars had to get 27.5 miles per gallon, or roughly double their fuel efficiency. These new rules applied to cars like sedans and station wagons under a category known as passenger cars.
Right.
But there were types of vehicles the US government exempted from these rules, things like pickup trucks, which everyday drivers weren't really driving at the time.
And the idea was, if these are working vehicles used by, farmers, construction crews, companies that are hauling freight, those vehicles need to be able to do their job without being choked by emissions controls and without being held to unrealistic fuel economy standards.
So passenger cars got one set of strict rules, and this other category, called light trucks, got another set of more relaxed standards. This regulation created an incentive for car makers to transform light trucks into a vehicle for everyday use. Put in a radio, lots of cargo space, and comfy seats, and voila, that's how we got.
But the problem is, if you care about carbon emissions, like having a country that, people overwhelmingly buy huge pickup trucks or just trucks or SUVs, you're going to be pumping out way more CO2 than a country that either has more electric cars or just smaller cars, because, typically the smaller the car, the smaller the tank, the less fuel it's going to consume. So, if you're thinking long term about the environment, you got to do some kind of initiative to either electrify big trucks, which I'm sure you can probably get. Can you get a electric F-150 now? Because I think the F-150 is the most popular pickup truck in the States, I think.
The SUV.
Okay, girls, we're off in our new Jeep Cherokee.
Because behind that classic appearance, it's rugged and powerful.
An automaker needs to spend less money and less time on fuel economy and emissions improvement if they're making and selling an SUV, because it falls under a category that is less stringently regulated.
We had the Wagoneer, but it was very low volume, very bespoke, very expensive. So only a very few people bought it. People that lived in Manhattan would go to the Hamptons or go to
the wood paneling. When I see a car like this, I just think of America. I don't know why. I just think of America.
New York State to go skiing. And that's how the SUV started off life.
This is Ralph Gilles, head of design at Stellantis, a conglomerate of car companies that includes Jeep. One of the early SUVs was the Chevy Blazer, built on the frame of the Chevy S10 truck. This is the traditional definition of an SUV, if it was built on the frame of a truck. And to meet the legal definition of a light truck, it had to have some clearance angles and dimensions just right.
Taking a utilitarian vehicle and turning it into a almost a premium luxury device that happened to be utilitarian. Then comes the Grand Cherokee.
The Jeep Grand Cherokee was built the way passenger cars are, in one piece, or unibody. These two types of car constructions, frame-based and unibody, today form the distinction between traditional SUVs and the new, increasingly popular category of crossover.
They're more efficiently packaged. You don't have the frame.
The Grand Cherokee was part of the early success story of SUVs in the 90s and 2000s, one that continues today. This bias towards light trucks is why a company like...
Any of you guys watching this, if you own a pickup truck, how much does it cost you to fill the tank from zero? I'd love to know.
Volkswagen, which once sold primarily passenger cars, has discontinued a lot of them today, like the Passat, in favor of SUVs and crossovers. And they've stopped producing all of their wagons, including the Jetta wagon I'm in. And a company like Ford has stopped producing all of their passenger cars except for the iconic Mustang. Okay, I'm gonna see if anyone at this car dealership will talk to me.
Buick was always car, really. It was mostly sedans. And then just with the market shift, we actually don't even sell a Buick sedan anymore. They don't even make a Buick sedan. It's all crossovers.
When was the last time you guys carried like a Buick passenger car?
It was like 3 or 4 years ago.
And how many did you have on the lot?
Like 1 to 100 of SUVs. We're here to sell cars, but we want to sell what people want. If they were here and people didn't want them, I'm glad they're not here anymore,
So this chart starts to make a lot more sense.
You gotta
1975 was the year these fuel economy standards for sedans and wagons were passed, the same ones that didn't apply as strictly to SUVs and trucks.
It's a little bit of a chicken and egg thing because the automakers have been marketing SUVs more preferentially than passenger cars. They've been putting more research and development into creating more models that fit into the SUV category. And they've made it so that it's an easier decision to get into an SUV than it is to get into a passenger car.
As of 2016, our fuel economy standards shifted. Vehicles are still separated by the stricter standard for passenger cars and looser standard for light trucks. But within those categories, there are more breakdowns. Regulators multiply a car's wheelbase length by its width to get a footprint. And larger cars within each category get weaker rules. That means that car makers are not only incentivized to phase out passenger cars in their fleet, but they are pushed to make each category bigger. The Toyota Camry got both longer.
This seems a bit suspicious to me. I feel like there's probably a lot of lobbying from big oil involved here, because like who else profits from manufacturers being forced to sell predominantly bigger cars with bigger fuel tanks? It's the oil companies, right? Because they sell more oil. Because it just doesn't make sense why SUVs and pickup trucks get this more lenient set of rules and regulations and smaller vehicles don't. Do you see what I mean? Like, who profits from this?
And wider, and the Toyota RAV4 did too. I've now reached Rhode Island, the very last state in the country to go light truck dominant. We have started the inevitable transition to electric vehicles, but
If you're still talking about a larger vehicle with higher ground clearance that's heavier and taller, it's still going to be less energy efficient, whether it's an electric car or an internal combustion powered car.
one sobering impact of big cars is the threat it poses to pedestrians. One study found that replacing the growth in SUVs with cars would have averted over 1,000 pedestrian deaths. People on foot get hit higher and in more vulnerable regions when hit by an SUV or a truck rather than a passenger car. Before hitting the beach, I stopped at my friend Kevin Wright's house. He's bucked the SUV trend and drives a Honda Fit, a car that was discontinued in 2020.
We had our daughter about 17 months ago. It's just kind of making sure that everybody has enough space to be comfortable as well as being safe. It gets good gas mileage and thinking about long-term, climate change is happening. What can we do to minimize our carbon footprint as much as we can? So we were thinking about a second car, maybe getting an SUV in that situation, but ultimately decided to kind of go the other direction and got an e-bike.
You have arrived.
Even though we're in Rhode Island, which was the last holdout for SUV dominance, there is still a lot of SUVs here. I'm curious if you think there's any political will or urgency to...
And it's funny because a lot of people in America, from what I've seen, like not only will they buy the pickup, but they'll also lift the pickup as well. So they'll raise the suspension on the pickup, so it's just even higher. I remember we were at this gas station and I walked past this, I think it was a Ram, like all black, glossy, like black alloy rims. It was lifted. I have to say, this car looked pretty badass. It did. It was lifted. It was huge. This thing was absolutely massive. Like, if I lived in America, would I own one of those? Maybe. I can kind of see the appeal. It was
change
huge.
This trend towards bigger cars.
That's something that has environmental concerns. It's something that has economic concerns with how much we are reliant on oil. It also has to do with safety, pedestrian safety, cyclist safety. So there is a desire among younger people and more politically active people to try to make it so that an SUV is not the default vehicle choice for American families.
The U.S. is unlikely to become a small car country anytime soon. But this dramatic transition to big cars wasn't just about consumer choice. It was enabled by a policy choice. So if we want our roads to look different, we could try and start there.
Great video. Very interesting. Super interesting video. I think, if you live somewhere that is slightly off-road, there's a lot of maybe gravelly roads, or maybe if you live in somewhere like, Sequoia National Park, where, again, there's a lot of like unpaved roads that you have to navigate, then I can see the appeal of having a bigger car because, it gives you more grip, because the heavier the car, the more downforce you're going to have in the car. And also they're more, capable of off-road driving. And if you work a job where, you're going to have to haul a lot of stuff to and from your job, maybe you're like a handyman and you've got a lot of tools, I can see the appeal of having a big car. But, other than that, but then again, I'm thinking in terms of UK prices, because, my Fiesta to fill it cost me about £70, which is about what, $85, $90 to fill the tank. That same tank in America is probably going to cost like half that, maybe less than half, because, we're paying £1.40 per litre, which is, what's that per gallon? I think there's 3.7 litres in a gallon. So that's like just under £6. So that's $8 per gallon. And I remember seeing prices in California of like $4. So yeah, half. So I guess if the fuel prices here weren't as high, maybe you'd see more pickup trucks around, but I just don't think the logistics, the roads would handle it. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next one.